location, and that's what takes you my. So I'm afraid you're just going to talk loud
Do that.
from the diaphragm.
Yes. Am I starting?
Yeah.
Good to go?
Time's gone.
Okay. Hi everyone. Thank you very much for coming. We're going to spend the next half an hour talking about horror movies and cybersecurity, but it's kind of mainly just horror movies, really. So my name is Jennifer. Very just briefly a little bit about me. I just graduated. I'm from up near Glasgow. I just graduated with my undergrad, digital security and forensics. I'm currently studying a Masters of Advanced Computer Science with AI, and I really like horror movies, which is why I'm doing this talk. I don't know every horror movie that's ever come out. I haven't seen them all, so if you're already preparing some kind of question about, have you seen this obscure black and white movie from the 1950s? No, I haven't, don't ask. I also really like horror movie behind the scenes photos, so throughout my talk I have scattered through some of my favourites just for if I had a slide that I thought was a bit lacking in excitement. So I've got some fun horror movie behind the scenes as well. So just a disclaimer before we get started, this talk will not have screamers, jump scares, rickrolls, etc. I too was traumatised by the scary maze game as a child, so we'll be having none of that here today. However, this talk will contain spoilers for the following movies: Black Christmas, The Thing, Hellraiser, Child's Play, The Blair Witch Project, and The Ring. I'll also mention Annabelle as well. Now, if you want to leave because you don't want spoilers for these movies, I will understand. However, I might judge you because all these movies came out before I was born. So you've had some time. So, we're going to start off talking a little bit about cyber incident response. Not too much, I promise. Very quickly, I think this is the NIST cyber incident response cycle. There are 4 different sections to it: preparation, then you move on to detection and analysis. How do you know that there is a threat, and then what kind of threat is it? After that, how do you contain the threat? How do you eradicate it? How do you recover from that? And then some post-incident activity. So to talk about cyber incident response, I'm going to talk about The Thing, which is a fantastic sci-fi horror movie. John Carpenter in 1982. It's based on I actually had notes, but I can't see them on here. So it's a novella that came out in the 1930s, and then there was a movie made on it called The Thing from Another World that came out in 1950s maybe, and then this one was kind of based on both of those things. So our movie starts off. Our main characters are a crew of American researchers in Antarctica. The movie begins with them having a nice afternoon, and suddenly there's some Norwegian researchers outside their base in a helicopter trying to kill a dog. I mean, why would you? Look at it, isn't it just adorable? I'm sure nothing bad will happen. So the helicopter comes down. The Norwegian researchers die. The American researchers take in their new good boy sled dog. So they go and investigate their Norwegian base. So step 1, preparation. What does our crew have? They have guns, they have helicopters, they have a snowcat, which is like a big truck with wheels for going through the snow. They have their sled dogs, and they have their radios, even though they can't get through to anyone on the radios the whole time. What does the crew know? What are their skills? So we have a big crew. They all have different jobs. We have pilots, we have mechanics, we have biologists. They all have different things to do. So it's a wide range of skills. They all have something to bring to the team. Step 2, detection and analysis. So how do we know we've got a threat? What kind of indicators of compromise might we have? And then once we know we have a threat, what kind of threat is it? So they arrive at the base, and it's not looking too good. There were buildings exploded everywhere. There were dead bodies. There were axes shoved in doors. Doesn't look too great. They find this corpse in the snow, which looks a wee bit kind of suspicious, and we don't really get to see it at first, but then they're like, hey, let's take it home with us, as you would if you found a corpse in the snow. I don't know how good with gore everyone in this room is, but I'm going to put a screenshot up from the movie. It's 80s practical effects, so I personally don't think it's too bad. But this is what the corpse looks like. You can't even really see it on this screen, but you can see a little behind the scenes photo of them like painting it up there. You really can barely see that. So at this point, yeah, there's an issue, there's a threat. We've got a weird corpse with 2 faces. We can move into analysis. At this point, they do an autopsy, and they decide that they find that this weird-looking corpse has got this weird-looking corpse has got normal human organs, which I really don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing that it's got normal human organs, but we'll see. Meanwhile, our good boy has been wandering around the base making friends. Isn't that nice? Nighttime comes. Our good boy goes to go and sleep with all the other sled dogs. Wow, you really can't see that at all. The sled dog is going into a cage with lots of other dogs, and nobody is happy about this, least of all the other dogs. When our good boy reveals itself to not actually be a dog, it's actually a horrifying beast, and its face rips open and it murders the other dogs. And then at this point we go, yep, that's a problem. We've got an issue. So they torch it with a flamethrower, and at this point they're pretty much decided, right, yeah, we have a threat. They do some sciencey analysis stuff, and they work out this creature, this thing, if you will, can not only mimic perfectly human other organisms, but there is also a 75% chance that one member of the crew at least is currently infected. So basically, it's now, in the words of John Kramer, we're going to play a game. Basically time to play Among Us. Who in the crew has been assimilated? So at this point we move on to containment, eradication and recovery. So our first member of the crew to be discovered to have been assimilated by the thing is this guy Bennings. He gets left alone with what they think is a corpse. They think it's dead. It's not really. It kind of drips blood everywhere, and then the next time we see him, he's in the corner, very much kind of being taken over. And then he runs outside, and they discover, can you even see it? Yeah, he has a really funky looking hand, so he's not quite fully assimilated yet. So they torch him. They take everything else to do with it outside and dump it and torch all of that. At this point, you might be thinking, fantastic, eradication done, we nailed it, the crew is now safe. However, you'll remember I showed you this earlier on of our good boy dog going to make friends among the crew. And this actually, the shadow that you see actually wasn't a member of the cast, it was a film crew member, because they didn't want it to be obvious if this was like a member of like the cast, like who it was going to be. So they basically just got a random film crew member and went, sit there, and filmed them with the shadow. So that's a random crew member, but we do know that there is someone else on the crew currently infected. Lots of things happen to get to this point. Lots of things. There's like everyone starts pulling guns on each other, tensions are rising, and this guy has a heart attack and then gets put up on the medical bench, and they're like, oh no, CPR, oh it's not working, get the defibrillator. And then his stomach opens and grows teeth, and it's not fantastic. And then they try to defibrillate. That guy's hands get chopped off, so he's dead. That guy on the table is also dead, if you couldn't tell. His head detaches also and grows legs and antennae and scuttles around the place. That also gets torched very quickly. They're really, really good with their flamethrowers in this movie. It's the one thing I can say about their incident response is that they really nailed the flamethrowers. We move on to possibly the most famous scene from the movie, the blood test scene. Basically, they decide, okay, well, if we test everyone's blood and we stick a hot copper wire in it, then we'll discover if anyone has like infected blood or is infected at all. So, they draw blood from everyone and they go down the line. And some people are fine. And then we get to one of this guy you can't really see right at the end, and they test the blood and it like explodes out of the petri dish. And the thing that always cracks me up about this is that they've had the sense to tie them all together, like tie them like down to a couch, but then they've tied them together. So when the guy at the end, you can't see it, so the guy at the end is freaking out and turning into a horrible thing, and the other two guys on the couch are just tied to him. So it's not very good on like the isolation tactics and all that kind of thing. So at this point, the remaining crew members who are alive basically there's only like 4 of them are left alive at this point. They basically decide, okay, we're just going to blow up the whole base, because nothing says eradication like flattening all your resources. So they blow everything up. They go down into the basement to try and destroy the generator. This guy, you can't even see it. There are two characters in this image. One of them is this guy here, who basically we kind of guessed from the start, right from the start, that he was a thing. He murders half of them. There's only like 2 of them left alive at this point. Everything goes up in flames, and the movie ends. You can theorize as to how this movie ends. Either you can say, oh, well, the 2 remaining people there just froze to death because they blew up their whole base and they're in Antarctica in the middle of nowhere. Or there are hints that maybe one of them maybe was infected, maybe wasn't, we don't really know. So it's fun to theorize about, fun to think about, and a movie with fantastic practical effects. I refused to watch the 2011 remake because I know that they replaced the practical effects with CGI, and from what I've seen, it looks horrendous, so I refuse to watch it. Maybe one point I will. But yeah, so that was The Thing, some cyber incident response. How well did they do? You can decide for yourself if you think they did a good job. Personally, I think, you're not exactly expecting an alien invasion. Originally, I had another big section after this work on the movie Alien, and I compared the two, like, oh, how well did they do? In that movie, in space, having an alien is a very reasonable concept, I think. So some of the things they do are a bit, like, well, could you not have planned for that? But in this case, I think they did a pretty good job with what they had. Oh yeah, Donan asked me to put this image in. He was like, please put it in your talk, it's going to be really funny. He's not even here because he's in track 1 doing his own talk, which I'm sure is probably better than this. But yeah, there we go. You can all go and tell Donan that Jennifer put in his funny Instagram meme. Okay, moving very quickly on. We'll talk about the Blair Witch Project, and we're going to talk about social engineering, because I've got a theory. I don't think that the Blair Witch is actually a witch. No, I don't think that at all. I think that the Blair Witch is actually just a master of social engineering. So we're going to look at 3 kind of main tactics of a social engineer: posing as a trusted figure, inducing fear or panic, and a sense of urgency. And we're going to see how the Blair Witch uses these to do some murder, basically. So the main plot of the Blair Witch Project, these are our 3 characters, Heather, Mike and Josh, and they go off into the woods to try and make a documentary on the Blair Witch, and very quickly they get targeted, basically. Lots of spooky things happen throughout the movie. There were like noises outside the tent. There were very spooky piles of rocks. There are some very spooky arts and crafts projects hung up in the trees. And as the movie goes on, all these things start happening. They find these lovely bits of art in the trees. They get rocks piled around their campsite. Eventually, one of the members goes missing. So the 2 that are left are trying to find him. They hear him one night out in the middle of nowhere, screaming for help. So they go out. They find that's an abandoned house, I promise. An empty abandoned house, basically. And so they go inside, they're following these screams, they run all around the house, and then they go down into the basement. Well, basically, this movie is a found footage, so it's all from like first person perspective and cameras. So we have like both of the cameras of the characters who are left. So the guy runs down into the basement, drops the camera, and we don't know what happens. And then Heather runs down, the girl runs down after him. And then this is probably the most famous bit from this movie that you can't even see. That is what I have there, is the ending where it's him standing in the corner like this. That's what I have here. I hope that most people have seen this movie. If you haven't, the ending, basically, the guy that went down first, he's standing in the corner facing away. And then when Heather goes down, she's like, oh, and then passes out and the camera drops, and that's the end of the movie. So basically, what the movie is trying to tell you is this is a witch. This is supernatural. She dragged them down there. It was all supernatural. She tricked them. I think she did trick them, but I don't think it was witchcraft. I think it was simply social engineering. So we'll start with impersonation of a trusted figure. I think that she pretends to be Josh. Josh is the character who gets taken away, and then they hear him like screaming and stuff like that. I don't think that's actually Josh. I think he's just dead. And then the witch is impersonating him. Impersonation is a very popular tactic in social engineering. So I think that's exactly what's going on here. Inducing fear or panic, we have the aforementioned strange noises, the very threatening piles of rocks, the stick arts and crafts project, and something I didn't mention before is the bundle of blood and body parts. It wouldn't be a horror movie without them. Heather wanders off at one point and finds some of like the guy that went missing, his like flannel shirt, and it's like wrapped up like a little gift, and then she opens it and inside there's like teeth and his tongue and a finger and blood, and it's like, oh, and she doesn't tell the other guy, she just wraps it back up and hides it and goes back, and then she's putting her backpack on and he's like, hey, are you okay? And she's like, I'm fine, thanks, and then it never gets brought up again. But that would make me panic if I found what I thought was, you know, my friend's tongue and fingers lying. But hopefully in your cybersecurity journey, you won't ever have to deal with that in the workplace. If you do, maybe a call to HR. The last point, sense of urgency. Again, they hear him screaming quite a lot. There's like lots of weird noises. A bundle of blood and body parts, that might make you want to hurry a little bit faster if you think your friend is being like slowly dismembered. It's maybe like, oh, we should maybe find him. They are also running out of food and clean water, which is a kind of a basic necessity. They were only meant to be in there for a couple of days, and then I think by the end of the movie they've been in there for like a week. It's kind of hard to tell with the way the movie is done. But yeah, so they're running out of food, they're eating leaves at one point, it's kind of gross. But yeah, I don't think that it's a witch. I think it was merely just some really good social engineering, and yeah, you can decide for yourself. I'm going to move on now and talk about Black Christmas and Insider Threat. So if you haven't seen this movie, please watch it, it's really good. Even though I'm going to spoil it for you, please watch it, I promise it's great. What is an insider threat? Insider threat is, you know, someone within your company or business or whatever who is causing a cyber risk, whether that's, you know, maliciously, if they're doing it on purpose, or it can also be unintentional, but in this case it's very much intentional. There were so many movies I could have talked about for insider threat, so many. One of them was The Shining with Jack Torrance. The other one was Saw 2. I could do a whole track about the Saw movies, and I could have a talk for each movie, and I'd still be talking at the after party. However, I don't think anyone else cares. So I thought I'll park, thank you, Mike. So I'll park the Saw 2, and I'll maybe talk about it another time. So CrowdStrike gave me these fantastically vague definitions of what an insider threat is, which let me talk about Black Christmas, because a lot of them are like, oh, it's someone who's meant to be there, like an employee, and they have authorization, and that didn't fit for Black Christmas, but these are really vague, so it fits. A cybersecurity risk that comes from within the organization. Perfect. What more do you need? This is our cast for Black Christmas. They're a group of sorority girls, and they are getting, plot of the movie is they are getting obscene phone calls, and then throughout the movie these obscene phone calls continue, and they all start getting murdered. Fantastic. So this movie is famous for a lot of things, and I could really ramble on, but I wanted to make a kind of brief point about one of the things it's kind of famous for. So this movie is 50 years old. It came out in 1974, the same year as Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And this movie, it's kind of, I don't want to say it's controversial, but for the time it came out, abortion was quite a touchy subject. Roe v. Wade in America was passed in 1973, this came in 1974. This is a Canadian movie, but 1969, I think, was when abortion was legalised in Canada. So in this movie, our main character, Jess, this is her and her boyfriend. She goes to her boyfriend and she's like, okay, I'm pregnant, but I'm gonna get an abortion. And he is so violent towards her that for the rest of the movie, he is the main suspect. He's not the murderer, but he threatens her physically and verbally. He smashes up the piano you can see in the background. He sneaks into the house and waits for her and threatens her. He tries to convince her to give up her degree. He's like, yes, give up your degree and I'll give up mine and we'll run away and get married and have children. And she's like, no thank you, I want my degree. I just bring it up, there's a lot of things in these movies that I could have rambled on about. I really love horror movies and there's so many facts, but this is just something that I think is very interesting for the time it came out. and I just wanted to mention it briefly. But yeah, he is the main suspect throughout the movie. He's who, because of how violent he is towards her to do with this, he is the main suspect. He's not the murderer, though, because we see through first-person POV shots. This is another thing that the movie is kind of well known for, is having like a lot of first-person shots of the killer. We see him climbing into their house at the start of the movie, and then he just kind of lingers and he like walks around the house, and it's really creepy because he's like, you see the characters will like walk downstairs and then he like leaves a room, and it's like, oh, get away. So we see him wandering around, and in the end, the reason I'm talking about insider threat to do with this is there's a very famous phrase that's like, the call is coming from inside the house. In this case, it's very literal. A lot of people think in horror movies that this kind of, obviously the trope is, oh, it's like an urban legend. In movies, a lot of people think that this trope came from When a Stranger Calls, which came out in 1979. This came out before, and this is where it kind of came from in movies, as far as I know. Basically, the climax of the movie is they've been trying to trace these phone calls, and they can't do it because the guy keeps hanging up. And then eventually they finally manage to trace it, and the police call Jess, who's sitting downstairs, and they're like, okay, you need to just put the phone down and walk out of the house. And she's like, oh, but my friends are asleep upstairs. They're not asleep, they're already dead, but she doesn't know that. Like, oh, but they're asleep. And he's like, no, that's fine, but just leave the house. And she is like, no, I'm gonna go and get my friends. And then he loses his patience and he goes, the calls are coming from inside the house, you need to leave the house. So the whole time that all these obscene phone calls have been coming through, it's been from the guy. He's in their loft, he is in the walls, he has been inside the house the whole time. The end of the movie is another one where it's kind of open for interpretation. They leave her, so she's just been through hell. She kills her boyfriend, by the way, because again, he's been so threatening that she thinks that he's gonna kill her. So he's dead. They think it was him. The cops all think it was him. They sedate her after her trauma and leave her in bed, and all leave the house. Just leave her sedated in the house by herself. Then we see from first-person perspective from the killer, he's not dead, he's still skulking around in their attic. And the movie ends with a slow pull away from the house and the phone rings. So you can make your decision based on whether or not you think she survives. Personally, I think she's dead, but you know, what we can hope. So what can we learn from Black Christmas? First of all, lock your metaphorical doors and windows. This guy literally climbs in through an open window, and there are several lines throughout the movie, like, who keeps leaving the front door open? And like, oh, are all the windows locked? And they never are. So lock your ports, close up your open ports, patch vulnerabilities, you know, don't leave those things lying open for intruders to sneak in. And also don't assume that just because you caught one threat that the danger is over. She does kill her boyfriend, who is being very threatening towards her, but the actual murderer is still skulking around the house. So he's still hanging about. Quick fire round, because I am maybe meant to be out of time. Very quickly. The Ring. If you don't know this movie, again, watch it. All the movies here I recommend, all the ones I'm talking about. So in this movie, very, very basically, there is a tape. If you watch the tape, you will die in 7 days unless you make a copy. With ransomware, very often you will get a countdown timer. You have 7 days to pay us, or you will, you know, you'll lose all your encrypted files. I don't think that's ever happened to anyone who didn't pay the ransom, but you never know, you never know. So basically, the Ring tape is a ransomware, is what I'm saying here. Hellraiser. So with Hellraiser, there's a box. When you get a phishing file or a phishing email or whatever, there might be, you know, like a document or a link that if you open the link or you open the document, bad things might happen. Similar to perhaps how if you open a box, bad things might happen. My point with this is basically the Hellraiser Cenobites are running a fishing ring. Child's Play. This is pretty simple. Chucky is a Trojan horse. You think you're getting a best friend for life, and instead you get people flung out of your apartment windows from the top story, and you get framed for murder. My very last point in this talk, I'm not going to spoil this movie, you'll be glad to hear I've spoiled everything else. If you're a person of culture, you might be looking at this and thinking, oh, she's going to talk about that Annabelle ransomware that all the news sites were talking about, because ooh, spooky, and look, she's got blood coming out of her eyes, isn't it scary? But I'm not. It's a good point, but it's not what I'm going to talk about. My very last point for this talk, what do we see here? We see a bad bitch locked in a glass case for the safety of the world. You want to know what else is a bad bitch locked in a glass case for the safety of the world? The Morse worm codes. That's all, thank you. I don't know, thank you. I don't know if I have time for questions, I might be over. Do I? Okay, I have time for a couple of questions then, if anyone has them after that. If there's anything anyone wants to ask me. Yes?
What's your favourite horror film?
Oh, and so can I give a top 5? Okay. In no particular order. Saw, you couldn't tell, Hellraiser, Candyman, The Shining, and Possum. Has anyone in here seen Possum? Okay, your homework. Have you seen Possum, Vi? Yes. Okay. Your homework, everyone, go home, watch Possum. It's a fantastic movie. If you look up the poster, you might see it and think, oh, it's a spider movie. All I'll say is, it's not a spider, it's worse. Any other questions? Yes, fine.
What's it besides Christine?
Brute force attack? Very like, yeah, sure, brute force, why not? Anything else? No, fantastic, thank you very much. And if anyone, if anyone would like to talk horror movies with me, come and find me at lunchtime, I'd be more than happy. Thank you.
Try and leave on a second. I'm just going to try and
Right,
see
so
what I
there
can
doesn't
bring.
seem to be a talk now scheduled until after the break, so the
And
next
it's a bit
talk is
kind of tune that focus.
You guys have